In the shadowed vaults of ancient monasteries, scribes once trembled as they copied texts so dangerous that merely possessing them could mean death. These were not ordinary religious writings, but forbidden revelations that claimed to unveil the terrifying mysteries of heaven itself, visions so disturbing that church fathers buried them beneath centuries of silence. Welcome to the world of Baruch, a text so controversial that it was systematically erased from Christian Bibles, its apocalyptic visions deemed too dangerous for ordinary believers. This is not just another excluded book. This is a collection of writings that dared to reveal what happens when a mortal man witnesses the throne room of God and lives to tell about it. The books attributed to Baruch contain some of the most unsettling prophecies ever recorded, visions of cosmic destruction, angelic rebellions, and divine judgments that make the book of Revelation seem tame by comparison. These texts speak of multiple heavens, elaborate hierarchies of angels and demons, and apocalyptic events that would reshape everything believers thought they knew about the end times. But why were these revelations considered so threatening? What did Baruch see in his visions that made religious authorities so desperate to suppress his teachings? The answers lie buried in texts that were banned, burned, and forgotten, surviving only in fragments hidden away in the libraries of Ethiopia, where the Orthodox Church preserved what others deemed too dangerous to exist. Tonight, we journey into the forbidden world of Baruch's secret teachings, exploring visions that were considered so heretical, so threatening to established doctrine, that they were systematically purged from the biblical canon. From his role as the scribe who recorded Jeremiah's prophecies to his transformation into a visionary who claimed to have seen the very throne of God, Baruch's story is one of forbidden knowledge and divine revelation. If you are ready to explore the darkest corners of forbidden biblical literature, to uncover secrets that religious authorities tried to bury forever, then prepare yourself for revelations that will challenge everything you thought you knew about the hidden books of the Bible. Chapter 1. The Scribe Who Saw Too Much. In the final days of Jerusalem, when Babylonian armies surrounded the holy city and smoke rose from burning temples, one man stood witness to both earthly destruction and heavenly revelation. Baruch, the faithful scribe of the prophet Jeremiah, would become something far more dangerous than a mere recorder of prophecy. He would become the vessel for visions so terrifying that future generations would try to erase his name from history. Baruch ben Neriah was no ordinary scribe. While others fled the approaching armies of Nebuchadnezzar, he remained at Jeremiah's side, his reed pen capturing every word of divine judgment that flowed from the prophet's lips. But the historical Baruch was only the beginning of a much darker story. The texts that bear his name tell of a transformation that would make him one of the most controversial figures in all of religious literature. The first book of Baruch, included in some Christian Bibles, seems innocent enough, a collection of prayers and confessions from the Babylonian exile. But this canonical text is merely the gateway to far more disturbing revelations. The real secrets lie in the additional books attributed to Baruch, texts that claim to record his direct encounters with the divine realm. According to these forbidden writings, Baruch's transformation began with a vision that would haunt him for the rest of his days. As Jerusalem burned around him, he claims to have been caught up in spirit, transported beyond the physical realm into the very presence of God. What he witnessed there would challenge every comfortable assumption about the nature of heaven and divine authority. The second book of Baruch, also known as the Syriac Apocalypse of Baruch, presents a vision of the end times so detailed and disturbing that early church fathers questioned whether any mortal man could have survived such revelations. In this text, Baruch describes conversations with angels, visions of cosmic destruction, and prophecies of a coming judgment that would make the flood of Noah seem like a gentle rain. But it was the third book of Baruch, the Greek Apocalypse, that truly crossed the line into forbidden territory. Here, Baruch claims to have been guided through multiple levels of heaven, each more terrifying than the last. He describes chambers where rebellious angels are imprisoned, levels of paradise where the righteous dead await resurrection, and throne rooms where divine beings debate the fate of humanity. These visions were not presented as allegory or spiritual metaphor. Baruch wrote with the authority of an eyewitness, describing in precise detail the architecture of heaven, the appearance of angels, and the mechanisms by which divine judgment operates. He claimed to have seen the very books in which human deeds are recorded, the scales on which souls are weighed, and the chambers where the wicked face eternal torment. What made Baruch's revelation so dangerous was not just their content, but their timing. Written during a period of intense persecution and uncertainty, these texts offered answers to questions that religious authorities preferred to leave mysterious. They provided detailed maps of the afterlife, specific timelines for the end of the world, and explicit descriptions of divine justice that challenged official doctrine. The authorities had good reason to be concerned. Baruch's visions suggested that divine revelation had not ended with the traditional prophets, that God continued to speak directly to chosen individuals who could bypass established religious hierarchy. Even more threatening, his descriptions of heavenly realms suggested a cosmos far more complex and dangerous than official teachings acknowledged. In Baruch's heaven, angels could rebel, divine plans could be questioned, and mortal humans could witness scenes of cosmic significance that were supposed to remain hidden until the end of time. This was not the sanitized afterlife of official doctrine, but a realm of cosmic conflict where divine justice operated according to principles that challenged human understanding. The scribe who had begun his career simply recording the words of another prophet had become something far more dangerous. A visionary whose claims to direct divine revelation threatened the very foundations of religious authority. His transformation from faithful recorder to cosmic witness would make his writings some of the most feared and suppressed texts in religious history. As we prepare to explore the specific visions that made Baruch's name synonymous with forbidden knowledge, remember that these were not abstract theological speculations. They were presented as first-hand accounts of divine encounters, revelations so powerful and disturbing that they could not be allowed to circulate freely among believers who might mistake them for authorized scripture. Chapter 2. Visions of Apocalypse. The apocalyptic visions recorded in Baruch's name read like dispatches from the end of the world, prophecies so detailed and terrifying that they make the book of Revelation seem restrained by comparison. These were not gentle warnings about spiritual judgment, but graphic descriptions of cosmic destruction that would consume both the physical world and the heavenly realms. In the second book of Baruch, the prophet claims to receive visions that span from the destruction of Jerusalem to the end of all things. But these are not the distant symbolic prophecies found in canonical scripture. Baruch's revelations are immediate, visceral, and filled with specific details about how divine judgment operates on both individual and cosmic scales. The text begins with Baruch questioning God about the apparent triumph of evil in the world. Why do the righteous suffer while the wicked prosper? Why has Jerusalem fallen to pagan armies? The divine response comes not through gentle reassurance, but through visions of cosmic conflict that reveal the true scope of spiritual warfare. Baruch describes being shown a great eagle that represents the final earthly empire, a beast whose wings cast shadows over the entire world. This eagle devours nations, tramples the righteous, and seems unstoppable in its hunger for dominion. But in a vision that surpasses anything in canonical prophecy, Baruch witnesses the moment when divine patience finally reaches its limit. The destruction begins not with earthly armies, but with cosmic forces that tear apart the very fabric of reality. Baruch describes stars falling from their courses, mountains melting like wax, and oceans boiling away into nothingness. This is not metaphorical judgment, but literal cosmic destruction that affects the fundamental structures of creation. But the most disturbing element of Baruch's apocalyptic vision is his description of the resurrection and judgment of the dead. Unlike the brief mentions of resurrection in canonical scripture, Baruch provides graphic details about how the dead are restored to life for their final judgment. He describes bodies reassembling from scattered elements, souls being forcibly reunited with flesh that has long since decayed, and the terror of those who realize that death was not an escape from divine justice. The judgment scene itself exceeds anything found in approved biblical texts. Baruch describes witnessing the moment when human souls are weighed in divine scales, their deeds measured against standards so perfect that even the righteous tremble. He claims to have seen the books in which every human action is recorded, documents so detailed that they include not just deeds, but thoughts, intentions, and words spoken in private moments. those found wanting face torments that Baruch describes with disturbing precision. He speaks of souls being cast into chambers of darkness, where they experience the full weight of their guilt, not as abstract punishment, but as the literal sensation of every sin they committed pressing down upon them like physical weight. The wicked do not simply suffer. They experience the accumulated pain of every evil they inflicted on others, multiplied by divine justice. Even more controversial are Baruch's visions of the intermediate state, the period between death and final judgment. He describes multiple levels of existence where souls await their final disposition, some in peace, others in torment, but all conscious and aware of their approaching fate. This detailed map of the afterlife provided believers with specific information about what happens after death, information that religious authorities preferred to keep mysterious. The third book of Baruch pushes these revelations even further, describing Baruch's guided tour through 7 heavens, each level revealing new horrors and wonders. In the first heaven, he encounters the souls of the righteous, but even they live in awareness of the cosmic conflict raging in higher realms. In the second heaven, he witnesses the punishment of rebellious angels, beings whose crimes against divine order resulted in torments that surpass human imagination. As Baruch ascends through higher heavens, the visions become increasingly disturbing. He describes chambers where divine justice is administered, courts where angelic beings debate the fates of human souls, and throne rooms where decisions are made that affect the destiny of entire nations. These are not the peaceful heavenly realms of popular imagination, but cosmic centers of power where divine wrath and mercy operate according to principles that challenge human understanding. The most terrifying revelation comes when Baruch claims to witness the moment of final judgment from the divine perspective. He describes seeing the entire history of creation compressed into a single moment, every human choice and its consequences laid bare before divine scrutiny. The weight of accumulated human evil appears so vast that even divine mercy seems strained to its limits. These visions were dangerous because they answered questions that official doctrine preferred to leave open. They provided specific timelines for the end of the world, detailed descriptions of post-mortem existence, and explicit accounts of divine justice that could terrify believers into despair or embolden them to challenge religious authority. The apocalyptic visions of Baruch represented more than theological speculation. They were presented as direct revelations that bypassed established religious hierarchy and provided ordinary believers with access to cosmic secrets that were supposed to remain hidden until the end of time. Chapter 3. The Forbidden Cosmology. Beyond the apocalyptic prophecies lay perhaps the most dangerous element of Baruch's revelations, a complete cosmology that mapped the structure of heaven and hell in detail that challenged every assumption about the divine realm. This was not the simple three-tiered universe of traditional scripture, but a complex system of multiple heavens, elaborate angelic hierarchies, and spiritual realms that operated according to principles never mentioned in canonical texts. The third book of Baruch presents the most comprehensive tour of the heavenly realms found in any ancient text, describing a journey through 7 distinct levels of heaven, each with its own inhabitants, laws, and purposes. This was not abstract theology, but a detailed guide to cosmic geography that claimed to reveal the actual structure of divine reality. In the first heaven, Baruch encounters the rulers of earthly kingdoms, former human beings who had been granted authority over nations and peoples. But these are not the glorified saints of traditional doctrine. They are revealed as cosmic bureaucrats, angelic beings tasked with implementing divine judgment on earth, often through methods that appear cruel and arbitrary to human understanding. The second heaven contains the rebellious angels, beings whose crimes against divine order resulted in imprisonment that serves as both punishment and cosmic necessity. Baruch describes seeing these fallen entities chained in chambers of darkness, their rebellion having cosmic consequences that continue to affect earthly events. Their punishment is not simply retributive, but serves to maintain the stability of creation itself. As Baruch ascends to higher heavens, the revelations become increasingly disturbing. The third heaven contains the souls of the righteous dead, but even they exist in a state of incomplete rest, aware that their final destiny depends on events still unfolding in lower realms. They are not the peacefully sleeping dead of traditional doctrine, but conscious beings actively involved in cosmic processes that affect the living. The fourth heaven reveals the mechanics of divine providence, the actual methods by which God governs creation. Baruch describes witnessing angelic beings responsible for natural phenomena, cosmic forces that operate according to principles that appear arbitrary or even cruel from human perspective. Earthquakes, plagues, and famines are revealed not as natural disasters, but as precisely calibrated instruments of divine justice. The fifth heaven contains the angelic armies, beings whose primary function is warfare against cosmic evil. These are not the gentle messengers of popular imagination, but terrifying warriors whose battles affect events in lower realms. Baruch describes witnessing conflicts between angelic forces that make earthly wars seem like children's games, cosmic battles whose outcomes determine the fate of nations and peoples. In the sixth heaven, Baruch encounters the cherubim and seraphim, beings whose proximity to divine glory has transformed them into entities barely recognizable as angels. They exist in a state of constant transformation, their forms shifting according to divine commands, their consciousness merged with cosmic forces that govern fundamental aspects of reality. The seventh heaven presents the most dangerous revelation of all, the throne room of God itself. But this is not the peaceful scene of divine majesty found in approved visions. Baruch describes a realm of such intense divine glory that it threatens to annihilate any created being that approaches too closely. The very presence of God operates according to principles that make mercy and wrath appear as different aspects of the same terrifying reality. What made this cosmology so threatening was its systematic nature. Unlike the fragmentary visions found in canonical scripture, Baruch's revelations provided a complete map of spiritual reality that answered every question about the nature of heaven and hell. This comprehensive guide to cosmic geography threatened to make religious authorities unnecessary, providing believers with direct access to divine secrets. Even more dangerous was the moral complexity revealed in these heavenly realms. The angels in Baruch's cosmology are not simple messengers of divine will, but complex beings with their own agendas, limitations, and failures. Divine justice operates according to principles that often appear harsh or arbitrary from human perspective, suggesting that cosmic morality differs fundamentally from earthly ethics. The rebellious angels are not simply evil beings to be defeated, but necessary components of cosmic order whose rebellion serves divine purposes that remain hidden from human understanding. Their punishment serves not just as retribution, but as cosmic infrastructure that maintains the stability of creation through methods that challenge traditional concepts of divine goodness. This complex cosmology suggested that the universe operates according to principles far more intricate and morally ambiguous than official doctrine acknowledged. Divine governance involves compromises, necessary evils, and moral complexities that traditional theology preferred to ignore or explain away. The detailed descriptions of angelic hierarchies, cosmic geography, and divine administration provided believers with information that threatened to make them independent of religious authority. If the structure of heaven could be mapped and understood, if the principles of divine justice could be explained in detail, then what need was there for priestly interpretation or ecclesiastical guidance? The forbidden cosmology of Baruch represented the ultimate challenge to religious authority, a systematic revelation of cosmic secrets that threatened to democratize divine knowledge and eliminate the mystery that kept believers dependent on institutional guidance. Chapter 4. Why they buried the truth. The systematic suppression of Baruch's revelations was not accidental oversight, but deliberate ecclesiastical policy designed to eliminate texts that pose fundamental threats to religious authority. The books attributed to Baruch were not simply excluded from the biblical canon. They were actively hunted down, confiscated, and destroyed by church authorities who recognized their potential to undermine established doctrine. The primary threat posed by Baruch's writings was their claim to provide direct access to divine revelation without the mediation of religious hierarchy. Unlike canonical prophets, who spoke to specific audiences about particular situations, Baruch claimed to have received comprehensive visions that answered fundamental questions about cosmic order, divine justice, and post-mortem existence. Early church fathers faced a dilemma when confronting these texts. The writings attributed to Baruch were clearly ancient, contained sophisticated theological concepts, and demonstrated knowledge of Jewish traditions that suggested authentic prophetic origins. They could not be dismissed as obvious forgeries or heretical innovations, yet their content challenged fundamental aspects of emerging Christian doctrine. The detailed apocalyptic timelines found in Baruch's visions posed particular problems for church authorities trying to establish stable institutions. If the end of the world could be calculated from prophetic chronologies, if divine judgment operated according to predictable principles, then why build churches, establish hierarchies, or accumulate earthly resources for long-term institutional survival? Even more threatening were the comprehensive descriptions of post-mortem existence found in these texts. Traditional doctrine maintained strategic ambiguity about the afterlife, allowing religious authorities to offer hope of salvation while maintaining fear of judgment. Baruch's detailed maps of heaven and hell eliminated this useful uncertainty, providing believers with specific information about what happens after death. The complex cosmology revealed in Baruch's heavenly visions challenged fundamental theological assumptions about divine simplicity and moral clarity. If heaven contained rebellious angels, if divine justice operated through morally ambiguous methods, if cosmic order required necessary evils, then traditional concepts of divine goodness needed radical revision. Church authorities recognized that these revelations could lead believers to question not just specific doctrines, but the entire framework of traditional theology. If cosmic morality differed fundamentally from earthly ethics, if divine justice operated according to principles that appeared harsh or arbitrary, then what confidence could believers have in official religious guidance? The systematic destruction of Baruch's writings began in the 4th century when church councils gained political power to enforce doctrinal uniformity. Possessing copies of these texts became grounds for charges of heresy, while church authorities offered rewards for information about hidden manuscripts. The campaign against Baruch's revelations was so thorough that most copies disappeared entirely from Christian communities. The few surviving manuscripts were preserved primarily in Ethiopian Orthodox libraries, where different theological traditions allowed for greater diversity in accepted texts. These isolated copies provided the only window into apocalyptic traditions that had been systematically erased from mainstream Christianity. The irony of this suppression campaign was that it validated the very claims made in Baruch's visions about religious corruption and institutional failure. The texts themselves prophesied that true revelation would be suppressed by religious authorities more concerned with maintaining power than preserving truth. Modern scholars studying the surviving fragments of Baruch's writings have uncovered evidence of sophisticated theological traditions that were deliberately eliminated from Christian history. These texts reveal alternative approaches to understanding divine revelation, cosmic order, and human destiny that challenge contemporary assumptions about early religious development. The systematic burial of Baruch's revelations represents one of the most successful censorship campaigns in religious history. Entire theological traditions were eliminated so thoroughly that their existence was forgotten by mainstream Christianity, preserved only in isolated manuscripts hidden away in distant libraries. The suppression of these texts created theological blind spots that continue to affect religious understanding today. Questions about divine justice, cosmic order, and post-mortem existence that were addressed comprehensively in Baruch's visions remain sources of uncertainty and controversy in contemporary theology. The forbidden teachings of Baruch continue to challenge contemporary believers to question which religious authorities have the right to determine what counts as legitimate revelation and which texts contain truths too dangerous for ordinary believers to possess.